After this lesson, students will be able to identify properties of numbers. Pause the movie to try these 6 questions and resume when you're ready. Number 1, we're trying to simplify, so we follow order of operations. Inside our parentheses, we have 9 plus 2, so we get 11. And 8 plus 11 gives us 19. Number 2, in our parentheses, we have negative 2 times 5, which is negative 10. And we're multiplying that by 3, which gives us negative 30. Number 3, we do multiplication and division from left to right, so we have negative 4 times 7, which is negative 28, times negative 5. A negative number times a negative number gives us a positive number, and 28 times 5 gives us 140. Number 4, negative 6 plus 9. These are different signs, so we subtract and take the sign of the higher number, which is positive, plus negative 4. The plus sign and the minus sign get in a battle, and the plus sign loses. So we have 3 minus 4. These are different signs, so we subtract and take the sign of the higher number. For number 5, we combine like terms. So we have positive 3 and negative 2, which are both constants. 3 and negative 2 give us 1, and then I have a positive x. Since 1 is positive, I can put a plus sign here. I wrote this as x plus 1 and not 1 plus x, so that it's in the standard form of a polynomial. And finally, number 6, I have 2t and positive 3t, which are like terms, and that gives us 5t minus 8. So now let's talk about some properties of numbers. You may recall learning about commutative property and associative property in the past. I like to remember commutative property from the word commute, which I think of as to move. If you think, for example, of your parents' commute from work to home, that's a specific distance that is the same distance as when they travel from home to work. So you change the order of where you start and where you finish, but they equal each other in distance. For the commutative property, the numbers move. So for example, 5 plus 6, which is 11, equals 6 plus 5, which is 11. The numbers moved. This also works for multiplication. 5 times 6 is 30, and 6 times 5 is 30. The numbers moved, and yet they're still equal. There is no such thing as the commutative property of subtraction, nor is there a commutative property of division. Now for the associative property, I think of the word associate, which means group. Think for example of an association, which is a group of people. So the grouping would be like our parentheses. Notice how for the associative property, the numbers do not move. We have 5, 6, 7, and 5, 6, 7. So unlike the commutative property, the numbers don't move. What does move are the parentheses, or the way that they are grouped. If we were to calculate this, 5 plus 6 gives us 11, plus 7 gives us 18. On the right side, 6 plus 7 is 13, plus 5 gives us 18. 18 does equal 18, so it's okay that we can move our parentheses. That's the associative property of addition. There is also an associative property of multiplication. Again, the numbers don't move, 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, only the parentheses, or the way that they are grouped, changes. Next up is the identity property. Your identity is who you are. It doesn't change. Keep that in mind as we learn about the identity property of numbers. For the identity property, we don't want the numbers to change. So on the left side of the equal sign, I have a 5, and on the right side, I want it to stay 5. So for the identity property of addition, the only thing I can add to 5 so that it does not change its identity would be 0. So the identity property of addition states that any number plus 0 is that number. Now for the identity property of multiplication, again, I want 9 to remain as 9. I don't want its identity to change. The only thing I can multiply by 9 in order for it to stay 9 would be 1. So identity property of multiplication states that any number times 1 is that number. Now inverse means opposite. So for the inverse property of addition, we have 5, and we're adding to it its opposite, negative 5. 5 plus negative 5 gives us an answer of 0. So the inverse property of addition states that the sum of a number and its additive inverse, or opposite, is 0. The inverse property of multiplication is when we take a number and multiply it by its multiplicative inverse, or reciprocal. Recall that the reciprocal is when you flip the fraction upside down. If I were to do 3/4 times 4/3, I could cross-reduce and get an answer of 1. So the product of a non-zero number and its multiplicative inverse, or reciprocal, is always going to be 1. The symmetric property. Think of the word symmetry, or symmetrical. So if I have A equaling B, I can switch it around so that B equals A. So unlike the commutative property, where the numbers move, I'm literally taking this equation now and flipping the entire equation around. I'm moving the left side of the equal sign to the right and the right side of the equal sign to the left. So for example, if I have 2 times 3 equals 6, the symmetric property would say that 6 equals 2 times 3. Now for the multiplication property of 0, we have n times 0 equals 0, or any number times 0 equals 0. So for example, I can take negative 35, multiply it by 0, and it gives me an answer of 0. Now the multiplication property of negative 1 would be when I take any number and multiply it by negative 1 in order to get its opposite. So negative 1 times n equals negative n. Another example would be negative 1 times negative 5, which would give me the opposite of negative 5, or 5. So pause the screen and try to figure out which property is being illustrated by these 6 examples, and resume when you're ready. Number 1. Negative 4 plus 4 equals 0. In this example, I'm adding a number and its opposite, or additive inverse. So this is an example of the inverse property of addition, G. Number 2. Negative 2 plus 1 equals 1 plus negative 2. Here, the numbers are moving, or commuting. Since I'm adding them, this would be the commutative property of addition, A. Number 3. Negative 1.8 times 1 equals negative 1.8. Notice how I have negative 1.8 on the left side of my equal sign and negative 1.8 on the right side of my equal sign. So the identity of negative 1.8 did not change even though I multiplied it by 1. So this would be the identity property of multiplication, F. Number 4. Negative 3 plus 0 equals negative 3. Since I'm adding 0, and the identity of negative 3 does not change from the left side to the right side of the equal sign, this is the identity property of addition, E. Number 5. 15 times 8 equals 8 times 15. The numbers did move. Since we're multiplying, this is the commutative property of multiplication, B. And finally, number 6, we have 5 plus 4 in parentheses plus 6, which equals 5 plus the quantity of 4 plus 6. Notice how the numbers did not move, 5, 4, 6, 5, 4, 6. What changed is the way they are associated or grouped. The parentheses changed. So this would be the associative property of addition, C.